At some point in life, many people experience a quiet transformation in how they respond to the opinions of others. Situations that once caused anxiety or self-doubt begin losing their emotional weight. Comments that once required long reflection suddenly feel less important. Instead of carefully adjusting behavior to match expectations, individuals begin acting more naturally, guided by their own understanding rather than by external approval. This shift often surprises both the person experiencing it and the people around them. Friends or colleagues may notice that someone who once seemed highly aware of social expectations now appears calmer, less reactive, and less concerned about judgment. To outsiders, this change can look sudden, but in reality, it is usually the result of a gradual psychological process that unfolds through years of experience. When people are younger, social perception carries enormous influence. Belonging to groups provides safety, identity, and opportunity. Because of this, the human mind becomes highly sensitive to approval and rejection. Small signals from others, tone of voice, facial expressions, or subtle reactions can strongly influence how individuals interpret themselves. At this stage, opinions from friends, colleagues, or even strangers may feel like important feedback about personal value. Many people spend years carefully adjusting their behavior to maintain positive reactions from those around them. They choose words carefully, avoid actions that might attract criticism, and sometimes hide parts of their personality in order to maintain social harmony. For a long time, this strategy appears necessary because it protects relationships and reduces conflict. However, as life experience accumulates, individuals begin observing something important about how opinions actually function within social environments. They notice that judgments change constantly depending on circumstances, mood, and perspective. A behavior that receives praise in one environment may receive criticism in another. A decision admired by one group may be questioned by another group with different priorities. Over time, this realization slowly weakens a belief that universal approval is possible. Individuals begin understanding that trying to satisfy every perspective is not only exhausting, but also logically impossible. This insight creates the first stage of emotional independence. Another factor that gradually reduces the influence of external opinions is experience with misunderstanding. Throughout life, people encounter situations where their intentions are interpreted incorrectly. Despite careful explanations or good intentions, others may still misunderstand their motivations. At first, these moments can feel frustrating or discouraging, but repeated experiences eventually reveal that perception is shaped by many factors beyond one's control. Personal history, emotional state, and individual expectations all influence how someone interprets behavior. Recognizing this complexity changes how individuals respond to judgment. Instead of assuming that every criticism reflects an accurate evaluation, they begin considering the limitations of perception itself. This shift weakens the emotional power of external opinions. People start realizing that what others think often says as much about the observer as it does about the person being observed. Emotional maturity also plays a significant role in this transformation. Over time, individuals develop a stronger sense of internal identity. Instead of relying entirely on external reactions to determine whether they are acting correctly, they begin evaluating their decisions through personal values and long-term priorities. When someone becomes confident in their own principles, the need for constant reassurance gradually fades. Approval from others may still feel pleasant, but it no longer feels necessary for emotional stability. the individual begins trusting their own judgment more consistently. This trust creates a sense of calm independence that was previously difficult to achieve. Another important realization emerges through observing how people behave in different situations. Individuals notice that the same people who express strong opinions about others often change those opinions depending on social context. Someone may criticize a decision today and later make a similar decision themselves when circumstances shift. Seeing these patterns repeatedly reveals that judgment is often situational rather than absolute. This awareness makes it easier to detach emotionally from criticism. Instead of feeling personally attacked, individuals begin recognizing judgment as a temporary expression shaped by circumstances. Over time, the emotional urgency to respond to every opinion fades. The individual becomes less reactive because they understand how fluid social evaluation truly is. As this shift toward emotional independence continues, individuals often begin noticing changes in their daily behavior. Situations that once triggered hesitation or self-monitoring begin to feel more relaxed. Instead of constantly evaluating how their actions might appear to others, people start focusing on whether those actions align with their own priorities and values. This change often leads to a more natural form of communication. Conversations become less guarded because the individual no longer feels the need to manage every impression carefully. Authentic reactions replace calculated responses designed to maintain approval. Interestingly, this authenticity can sometimes improve relationships rather than weaken them. When someone speaks and acts more honestly, others often sense a reduction in social performance. Interactions become simpler and more transparent because they are no longer filtered through constant concern about reputation. Another important effect of this transformation involves emotional energy. Worrying about external judgment requires continuous attention. The mind repeatedly evaluates how others might interpret decisions, appearance, or behavior. Over time, this mental process can consume a significant amount of emotional resources. When individuals begin releasing the need for universal approval, that mental energy becomes available for other pursuits. Creativity, curiosity, and personal development often expand when attention is no longer dominated by social evaluation. People begin exploring interests that they previously avoided because they feared negative reactions. This freedom can lead to unexpected personal growth. Individuals discover abilities or passions that remained hidden while they were focused primarily on maintaining social approval. Another transformation occurs in how individuals interpret criticism. Earlier in life, criticism may have felt threatening because it seemed to challenge personal identity. But with greater emotional stability, criticism becomes easier to evaluate objectively. Instead of reacting immediately, individuals begin asking whether the criticism contains useful information. If it does, they may adjust their behavior accordingly. If it does not, they simply allow it to pass without emotional attachment. This selective response to criticism represents a significant psychological shift. The individual is no longer controlled by external evaluation, but is still capable of learning from constructive feedback. Social relationships also change as this mindset develops. People who rely heavily on social approval may initially feel confused by the individual's reduced sensitivity to judgment. They may interpret the change as arrogance or indifference. But over time, many observers begin recognizing the stability behind behavior. Someone who is not constantly reacting to opinions often appears calmer and more confident. This calm presence can gradually influence the social environment itself. Others may feel more comfortable expressing their own perspectives because the conversation is no longer dominated by fear or judgment. In this way, emotional independence can quietly reshape group dynamics. There is also a deeper philosophical dimension to this transformation. Human societies function through shared expectations and mutual evaluation. These mechanisms help maintain cooperation and stability within groups. However, when individuals become excessively dependent on approval, they risk losing connection with their own values. The challenge of maturity is finding balance between awareness of social expectations and loyalty to personal principles. When someone stops caring excessively about what others think, it does not mean they reject society or ignore the impact of their actions. Instead, it means they have learned to evaluate those actions through a broader perspective. They understand that approval is temporary and that authenticity often leads to more meaningful connections than constant conformity. Ultimately, the moment when someone stops caring so much about external opinions is not an act of rebellion, but an evolution of perspective. The individual realizes that life becomes clearer when decisions are guided by values rather than by the shifting reactions of others. Opinions may continue appearing from every direction, but they no longer determine the path forward. The person has discovered a quieter form of confidence, one that allows them to move through the world without constantly seeking permission to be themselves.